Hey guys, this is Mrs. Winters, and today we're going to talk about the different types of real numbers that you can actually locate on a real number line. And the simplest type of numbers on a real number line are counting numbers, numbers that you use to count with. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. Now, unfortunately, someone decided that we would call these natural instead of counting. So most of the time they're referred to as natural. However, I wish they would have called them counting, but for consistency with the book, we'll just call them natural. So natural numbers are these counting numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We can build another type of number on the number line by simply just inserting 0 into that set. So when you take the counting numbers plus 0, you get a set of numbers called the whole numbers. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And then we can expand our real number system into the negative area if we actually talk about the positive and negative counting numbers along with 0. And that set is named the integers. Integers are the positive and negative counting numbers and 0. So in set notation, you actually have the numbers going to the right to positive infinity and to the left to negative infinity. So when you do this with set notation, you have your ... -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. And these numbers are the typical labels on your real number line. Now, and so those all are real numbers. Natural numbers, whole numbers, integers, those are the real numbers that you're very, very familiar with. Now, if we extend the system another time to include rational numbers are numbers that are ratios, like 3, -2, 1/2, 1/3, 0, etc. It's impossible to list those in set notation because they'll always be, if you pick two rational numbers that are very close together, you'll find another one in between there, and you'll never get done with the list. So we can't use set notation to list the rational numbers, but they are all ratios, just like we could write 3 as 3/1, 9/3, lots of ways. We could write -2 as 10/-5, or -12/6, lots of different ways. Rational numbers can be written as fractions. Even 0 could be written as 0/1. Now, sometimes though, when you get into the decimals, kids aren't sure. So a rational number is either a terminating decimal or a repeating decimal. If the decimal terminates, that means when you go to carry out the division, like 1/2, 1 divided by 2, your division process will terminate after you get the answer 0.5 because you have no remainder. But also rational numbers include repeating decimals like 2 1/3, because when you go to divide that out, and of course that would be like 7 divided by 3, but when you go to divide that out, you keep getting a remainder of 1, and then you keep having to put another 3 in your answer. So that never terminates, it only repeats. So rational numbers are ratios, which are fractions. So rational numbers are numbers that can be written as fractions. In the decimal ballpark, they are either terminating or repeating decimals. Now, the really weird set of numbers are the irrational numbers. And as I've said here, irrational numbers are the weird numbers. Numbers like pi, the square root of 5, the cube root of 7, those kind of numbers. And actually later on in the course, we're going to discuss an irrational number whose name is e, a small case e. Now, the thing about irrational numbers, the IR prefix on that word means they are not rational. So they cannot be written as fractions, which then would imply they are not terminating and they are not repeating. So irrational numbers are those somewhat weird numbers that have to be approximated in application situations if asked to be approximated. But there are those weird numbers like pi and the square roots and the cubed roots that don't come out nice. And even these other weird numbers like e that we'll learn about later. So keep in mind that the real number line has all kinds of real numbers on it. It has your counting numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, and on to the right. When you include 0 in that list, then you're talking about whole numbers. When you get the negative and positive whole numbers, that would be your set of integers that you usually label your real number line with. And then also scattered along that number line are all kinds of fractions. You could never label them all, but all kinds of fractions. And really equally, there are all kinds of weird, irrational numbers on that number line too. Because not only do you have the square root of 2 on the number line, but you have half the square root of 2, 2/3 the square root of 2, a negative 1/10 square root of 2, and so on. And so you can see if you could never actually pick a point out for all these numbers because there's so many of them. But those weird ones that don't terminate and don't repeat, those are your irrational numbers. So hopefully this makes sense to you, and your assignment will have to do with this information. So have a good rest of the day. I'll see you tomorrow.